So it doesn't matter if there's 3 people out there or 30,000. You got to make sure it comes down to connecting with just, at very least, that one person out there who needs it.
This is Uncover the Music, Boots and Hearts edition. Exclusive interviews with the artists and talented people making this year's festival happen. Presented by barrieuncovered.ca. Returning to this year's Boots and Hearts Festival are John and James Abrams. The brotherly duo known as the Abrams have been performing and touring for the better part of 2 decades, and it's been a family affair throughout their career. We had a chance to speak with John on the phone and find out more about them and what they have in store for this year's Boots and Hearts show. So, 4th generation, is that accurate? You guys are 4th generation musicians?
Yeah, that's it. We started 18 years ago. James and I were 9 and 11 years old when we started touring. And we're actually the 4th generation in our family on tour would go out and play music. So it all started back with our great-grandparents in the 1930s. They had like a post-vaudeville, gospel country duo. They called themselves the Sweethearts from the West, and they're from Eastern Ontario, which we always thought was pretty funny. But yeah, they traveled around. Now, James and I have certainly taken it a few steps farther than the amount of touring our family did prior. But it was a touring outfit. It started out as the Abrams family, really. That when James and I were little, as a bluegrass gospel band, we would travel around throughout the United States and a little bit in Canada. And we sort of were a bit of a side show on that main performance where we'd get up for a couple songs, and then it just sort of grew from there and became the Abrams Brothers. And we just shortened it to the Abrams, I'd say maybe 5 years ago or so.
And were the other family members, were they looking on music as a career the way you guys have looked at it, or were they kind of just doing it as something they loved? And what would you say?
Yeah, definitely the latter. Like it was more, and I wouldn't even go as far as to say it was a hobby. It was definitely an activity that we did as a family. It was a big part of their life alongside their respective jobs, which is why I think James and I were so sort of inundated with it as kids. It wasn't just something we did every so often. It was something it was part of the culture of our family to play music together every week, and they got together for a band practice every week. And James and I remember Wednesday nights we'd be at our grandparents' place, and our whole family would be playing music in the living room. And before James and I started playing violin, we just sit there and draw, and just sort of bide our time, and started to realize, well, maybe we should get involved in this somehow.
Was there ever a point where you considered, you were kind of born into it, but was there ever any other considerations for a career for you, or was it just music basically?
Well, James and I, we've always maintained our education alongside of our career in music. We've both gone to Queen's University, and so we're interested in lots of different things. Music is the forefront of what we do on a daily basis. But so many aspects of the music business are interesting to James and I. We are we manage ourselves. We're very involved in all of the marketing of what we do, and that's all part of the fun for us. We love obviously the artistic side, the songwriting side. The performing side is really the big payoff for us, is getting a chance to connect with people personally on stage. That's where it's always been. That's sort of the core of the engine of our career. But all the other aspects of our music career are things that interest us, and a lot of them have to do with things that aren't necessarily dependent on us specifically playing music, and that's sort of the managing and the marketing of the business.
Now, not all musicians go that route. They don't do the education. They tend to dive in. Not all of them, but a lot of them tend to just dive in and go right to music. How has university helped you in terms of your music career?
Oh, I've always found, James is the same, that there's 2 reasons. Number one, having a different outlet for our energy and attention really helps us give ourselves breaks. From the music career, it's very high octane, and so you need to have some sort of another outlet to sort of vent your mind, and
Sure.
And so that's one big thing. because James and I are very tenacious. We're very driven, very intense, in a positive way about our music career. And so the nice thing is getting to read other things or getting to practice other components of our brain really help. The other thing is too, we've always found that sort of the critical thinking skills and the writing skills that we've always been able to develop through continuing our education alongside actually help make the songwriting process way more efficient, at least for us. It just feels like it helps in our ability to kind of think strategically about writing and think differently about the way we use language and so that it's funny. The two don't kind of go to war with one another. They actually sort of complement one another, and that's at least, it's not for everybody, but we've always found for us it allows us to be able to have a nice balance in life.
And a lot of great experience there to draw on within your family, your father, your mother, education, different sort of careers. What a lot of great fodder for songs and for music creativity too. Yeah, and
that's James and I as songwriters, particularly with country music, which we've always loved. I mean, growing up singing and playing old-time country and bluegrass music with our family, so much of that is about very emotive stories, right? It's so much about stories that try and capture a very specific feeling. That could be, an optimistic feeling. It could be a feeling of sorrow. It could be a combination of both. And I think that's one thing that has always attracted us to country music and sort of all the different genres that fall under that umbrella, is that country's so honest. It just pulls out these very honest stories that connect with people, and that's all James and I ever strive to do as songwriters. We go, okay, when we're writing a song, we want to tell certainly our own story, which on this new record we feel like we've really been able to do that, but we also want to do it in such a way that you could be a 16-year-old girl or a 65-year-old grandfather out in the crowd and go, I know what that feels like. I see myself in that song. And so country music is such a great canvas for that, and it's something that we've always felt.
And how would you describe your sound? Because I've listened, and it's bluegrass for sure. It's a little classic rock almost. It's almost a little gospel. You tell me, how would you describe your sound?
Yeah, with this new record, Sounds Good to Me and Better Late Than Never are out now. This record is really, it takes a lot of influence from, that 80s and 90s, those big, love rock anthems, as we like to call them. Especially from that sort of working rock is what we call it. The Tom Cochrane, Tom Petty, Bruce Springsteen, John Mellencamp corner of rock and roll, which is something we've always loved listening to, especially from our teen years onward, because it similarly tells these very, very honest stories. It always felt like country to us when we listened to those songs. And so this record's very influenced by that, but it's also really influenced by a lot of bands that have been able to capture their live energy on a record. So Zac Brown Band, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, the Charlie Daniels Band. You'll hear a lot of that influence of ours in this record, and that's because James and I have always felt like it's been difficult in the past to try and capture the live energy that we have on stage. That's something that we've always focused on heavily, is our live show being highly energetic, really engaging. And it's difficult to capture that in the studio, and we really feel like with this record, it's really captured this very lively, at times raw energy that we're able to bring to the stage. And that's what's exciting about this record for us. It's
definitely got that, and definitely, you mentioned Tom Petty. That I was going to say that is, I did get a Tom Petty vibe.
Well, I mean, we were listening to so much of that stuff, like when we were writing this record. Like we were listening to it all the time. And James and I drive our own tour bus, and
you actually drive the bus?
Yeah, we both have our licenses to drive commercial buses and stuff. So we have a 47-foot tour bus. It actually belonged to a classic country band called Sawyer Brown back in the 90s, and so we have their bus now, and so we drive it around, and whether we're in the tour bus or James and I are driving in our SUV to to radio appearances or what, James and I are always listening to songs in the car, and he and I were listening to a ton of that stuff, both on the Zach Brown, Charlie Daniels, Nitty Gritty Dirt Band side, and this classic, working rock with the big sort of sentiments of love, like even Meatloaf, I'd Do Anything for Love, like those big sort of epic songs. I think they kind of collided with this record because we were listening to a ton of that stuff, and it just tells a story. James and I are like that as writers and as people. We're, we both have long-term relationships. My wife and I have been married 4 years now. We've been together for 10. James has been with his girlfriend for 10 years. We've had such wonderful support from them over the years, obviously alongside of our family. So the kind of songs that we write are those kind of emotional, songs that really sort of harness the ideas of the power of love in your life, and the beautiful commitment that can come from that. That's kind of just our corner of the world, I guess, and not our own, but obviously that's just kind of where we like to be when we write. So that's why you'll hear a lot of that on this record. It's a very personal record. We've written a lot from our own hearts and experience.
And so you literally and figuratively drive the bus. Did you guys find anything? It's Sawyer Brown's old bus. Did you find anything in the back? Some old case of beer or anything when you bought it?
What's funny? Not when we bought it. They did a pretty good job of cleaning it out. But it's a black tour bus. It's a black and silver. It's an old Eagle bus, right? So it's one of the later models of Eagle before they stopped making them. But it's the kind of bus that like Bon Jovi would tour in. I mean, if you look at any of those 80s rock music videos, they're all in these buses. And so we love that about it, because when we bought it, we kept finding areas that weren't fully painted on the bus, sort of both outside and inside, that had this teal color. We thought, man, they really, they painted over this sort of, teal colored bus, really is what it was before somebody painted it black.
That's a very 80s, 90s, early 90s teal kind of color, isn't it?
Exactly, and apparently on the back of the bus, underneath the black paint, somebody painted over it, were a pair of dancing horses, hand painted on the back of the bus. So part of me wishes we I don't think we can uncover, but we might just have to paint a couple dancing horses on the back to pay homage to the history of the bus. But no, it's pretty funny. I think with those tour buses, they're so inspiring in their own way, because what kind of songs were written on them, going down the road. An even greater example of that is we have another tour bus. Our first tour bus we traveled in as kids. We've got two of them. This is the more recent one we bought in 2006. But before that, we toured in a bus that was owned by Jim and Jesse McReynolds. Now, Jim and Jesse, not necessarily known to many up in Canada, but Jim and Jesse were pioneers of bluegrass music and stars of the Grand Ole Opry way back in the 50s and 60s. And Jesse McReynolds was a huge influence on us and ended up becoming something of a mentor to us after we bought their bus. And this bus was, the people that travel on this bus, just to name a few: Bill Monroe, Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, the great, Johnny Cash, the great people that pioneered country and bluegrass music. They all sat on this bus at one time.
Wow, that's an impressive roster.
Songs. Yeah, and so they were writing songs on this bus and jamming at the front of it. And so the buses themselves, like the walls contain all that music. It's just sort of still there. And so it's hard not to write songs when we travel down the road, which is something that James and I love to do. Road influence is like what we like to call it. James and I, we've toured a ton over our years, and so the stories and the ideas that we get for songs come a lot from meeting people out on the road. A lot of the time in really small towns in the United States and Canada. We just came off of our tour around the single Sounds Good to Me, and we had 18 shows across the U.S., and they weren't in big cities. They were in very small towns all over the U.S., and particularly, these concerts where, they'll have a concert and people will come from like a 50-mile radius, like from farm communities all over. And that's a lot of what we just did touring, and we did that over the last couple of years when we were writing these songs. So it's very, that's the kind of thing we like to write into the songs as well.
And is there you just talked about playing really small venues where you get these cool little smaller venues where people are coming from, kilometers away. You're going to play Boots and Hearts, biggest country music festival in Canada. Do you prepare differently for smaller shows versus bigger shows, or is it just, you play your stuff and...
Yeah, no, I mean, totally. It's, we have this wide range, and I mean, particularly in the U.S. when we play, they're I'd say anywhere between 500 and 1,000-seater venues that are like auditorium type shows. But then we'll get over into the UK and Europe and play smaller clubs around between festivals. And I think for us, the thing that we were always taught when we were kids, not just by our family, but by some of the people that we would watch and that would mentor us. Remember watching the Lewis family, who are classic country and bluegrass icons, watching Earl Scruggs perform when we were kids at a small festival in Maine. Another one, we were chatting with Doc Watson. I'm not sure if you know who Doc Watson is, but he was a blind guitar player that was hugely influential on some of the greatest country musicians that ever lived. He took about 45 minutes with us at this festival in Maine to talk to us about the business and why it's important. And some of the things that we always heard growing up consistently from every act that had been around for years touring were that, listen, it doesn't matter if you're playing for 2 people or 20 people or 220,000. You always give them the same show. They always get the same level of energy and excitement. And that was really put to the test for us when we played in North Carolina when we were teenagers. I remember we played this festival that was actually sort of similar to Boots and Hearts, actually designed for a whole lot more people. And on their biggest night, and I'm not kidding, on their biggest night, they had 11 people at this festival.
Oh,
wow. Obviously, it didn't end up lasting very long, but we played, 3 sets a day for 3 days, and each set was an hour and a half long, and it was 100-degree heat. Fahrenheit out there, and 100% humidity. And it's any show that we play today is so much easier than that. so playing at Boots and Hearts, I mean, 2 years ago when we played the main stage in 2017, that was an exhilarating experience for us because we'd never been on a stage that huge. I mean, Boots and Hearts is one of the biggest country festivals in North America, let alone Canada. And so, the energy that you get from an audience that's larger is obviously quite, it gives you a lot of enthusiasm. But, that's the easy stuff. It's the stuff when you don't hear a whole lot of applause out front, but you've got to do the same show.
Right.
And that's something that we've always learned and maintained, and it's important for us to do that. Is you got to put the same effort in, no matter how big the show. And so that's what you see at Boots is going to be a lot of what you'd see even in a club with 50 people. And it all comes down to, for us, the whole reason we play music is that we want our music to touch people's lives in some way. We want it to reach out and sort of hopefully uplift people. That's why a lot of our songs have some sort of a hopeful component to it. We want people to walk away from the show feeling like they have a more optimistic or positive outlook on life. So it all comes down to one person anyway. As long as one person is walking away from the show feeling that way. So it doesn't matter if there's 3 people out there or 30,000. You got to make sure it comes down to connecting with just, at very least, that one person out there who needs it.
John, what's the best way for people to get more about you? Is it website? Is it Instagram? If they want to hear your music, what's the best way for people to connect with you guys?
Yeah, well, we're on all the major platforms for streaming, so Spotify, Apple Music, the whole deal. But certainly the website is theabramsmusic.com, and we're on Instagram a lot. We post to Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but you can certainly connect with us there. But that's the nice thing about having worked with Warner since 2015 is we've now got a whole lot of help.
Uncover the Music is an exclusive podcast produced by barrieuncovered.ca. Subscribe to Uncover the Music on Spotify, iTunes, and wherever else you get podcasts. And find out more about us at barrieuncovered.ca on Facebook and on Instagram. The handle is @barrieuncovered.
You're still here? It's over. Go home.